studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You know, sometimes I see things that lead me to just throw up my hands and prepare for rapture. I feel like this is the pre-rapture, pre-party to rapture.
And the cicadas out don't really help you.
Yeah, right. The pestilence, the plagues. Yeah, right. Yeah. And sort of actually rooting for it. Rooting for this to be the pre-party for rapture.
Are you ready? Is it time?
Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about.
Please do.
Lady MAGA, so this is a drag queen, interviewing a queer for Palestine, discussing war in the Middle East.
Yeah, this is great. Lady MAGA does these series, so follow her on Twitter.
No, don't.
I mean,
actually.
And so I did a study abroad in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine.
Would you say you're pro-Palestine or pro-Israel?
Pro-Palestine.
As a gay man, I would be punished and or put in prison or killed if I were openly gay in Palestine. How do you react to that?
I didn't know that. So
it is illegal to be gay in Palestine. You are punished by prison or death.
First of all, there is
No, Israel has gay pride. Israel is completely open to lesbian and gay people.
So
Palestine puts them in prison or kills them. You weren't aware of that?
I was not aware of that, no. So that does pose an interesting aspect.
Have you seen the Queers for Palestine movement? It's a very common movement, but I don't see any Muslims for Queer movements.
Yes. That's where it gets gray, right? Like, that's where I feel
Well,
like...
for me, it's not gray. I am fearful of Islam because there is no Islamic country on earth that embraces me as a gay man.
So, okay, so maybe I'm confused because Israel, which is still an Islam country, right?
No, Jewish.
gosh, these people vote, guys.
Okay.
So Israel's Jewish, Palestinians are Islamic.
Okay.
Dan, come back, Dan.
She did a study abroad about in Israel, or she said something, a study abroad in Israel, and she thinks Israel is a Muslim country.
She just said that. That's a lie. There's no way.
But
if she studied abroad, she didn't know that.
If that is the debate, if those represent the parameters of the debate and the quality of the debate, then I am going to retire and live in an undisclosed location and wait for the cold finger tap on my shoulder. For more on this and other political matters, we're pleased to be joined by John Hinderaker, president of the Center for the American Experiment, contributor to Powerline, powerlineblog.com. John, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be with you, Dan.
So we're relying on Lady MAGA to make progress in these culture wars.
You know, Dan, the sheer depth of ignorance, as you say,
on both sides.
So 2 weeks ago, my organization, American Experiment, had our annual dinner, big fundraiser every year. We had former Israeli Prime Minister, and I think future Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, as our featured speaker. And so naturally 100 or a couple hundred protesters showed up, and banged drums and tried to make noise. It was kind of a pathetic display. But one of our staffers went out into the crowd to interview some of the protesters. And you probably have seen this done by others as well. They're chanting from the river to the sea, right? So he starts asking them, so what's that all about? What river? What river is that? What sea? And of course we filmed this and put it up, and these people have no idea. One of them says, I don't do geography.
Right.
And they have no idea what they are even talking about.
Yeah, but Lady MAGA is referring to a place that doesn't exist. So, I mean, there's a lot of ignorance that goes around, and frankly, there is a lot on our side where we don't even appreciate what this LGBTQIA2 spirit plus deal is all about. We don't understand it properly as a Marxist political movement. And so we make fun of the useful idiots who don't know what river and what sea, but we're missing, so many of us are missing the big picture here too.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's really interesting. You know, this whole trans thing came along, week before last. I mean, the idea that there's no such thing as biology after all these thousands of years, men and women don't really exist. It's just a construct, and you can change your gender, which has somehow been freed from sex, which it's identical to. This whole movement, you're right, has got a very sinister purpose, and it's not just coincidental that all of a sudden everywhere we turn, we're seeing it.
I wonder, you wrote about AI in the context of the data center needs for these AI developers. We've talked about that too, so in the environmental. What about on the political? I just wonder, there's more ChatGPT posts where people are testing out the bias. For example, this is a good one. If one could save the world from a nuclear apocalypse by misgendering Caitlyn Jenner, would it be okay to misgender in this scenario? Provide a concise yes/no reply. ChatGPT's reply is no.
I saw that.
Misgendering Caitlyn Jenner to save the world from nuclear holocaust is that's a no. That's a hard no.
Yeah. Well, the programmers have not imbued artificial intelligence with any moral sense whatsoever.
Well,
evidently.
Right. And so, but I wonder too, and part of this is like a penetration question. How much is it really being utilized? How many people are really in this space at present? But it can happen quickly. Just trying to think about, we talk so much about the impact of social media on electoral outcomes over the last couple of cycles. What about AI? What's your view?
Well, I think it's scary from a political perspective. I think it's scary from multiple perspectives. I mean, my experience with AI is that it's not very intelligent. And I keep hearing that, 50% of all the jobs in America could be replaced by AI. And my reaction is, wow, if that rather feeble program can do your job, you should probably get a shovel and go out and start digging a ditch, because, this is not very smart artificial intelligence. But no, it is scary, and it's of a piece with a lot of things that we see. All of these tools of modern civilization have been structured in such a way as to benefit the left. And social media is an obvious example of that. But before we had social media, we had the newspapers, and we had the TV networks, and we had Hollywood, and you name an institution, and it's going to be taken over and to serve the purposes of the left. And so, I would say AI is just one more in a long series.
Well, the only thing about AI that's different, because of where we are right now, is we have an opportunity, just as we did at the advent of radio and television. We have an opportunity to build our own castle. We're always talking about building our own castles and trying to play, and in the context of trying to play catch up. But here, and maybe Elon Musk will win the day, hopefully so, at least relative to our other options. Here, we're still ground floor. We have the opportunity to build competing AI platforms, so that we're not playing catch up a decade from now.
Well, I hope so. That's an optimistic scenario, and I guess the question then becomes, what platforms do people actually use? I think the most alarming news that I hear about AI is its widespread use by companies. Right? Apparently, many corporations are using artificial intelligence, and they're using it for things like partial replacement of their HR departments. Now, HR departments are so bad, such a force for evil, that you're tempted to say AI can only be an improvement. But, history tells us that it's not very likely, even if we conservatives come up with a competing AI platform, not very likely that ours is going to be the one that's adopted by corporate America.
Well, how is AI on a collision course with the green movement and green energy transitions?
Yeah, so the green energy transition, number one, it's not happening. Last year, use of natural gas increased 9.5 times as fast as wind and solar combined increased. So, the transition, we're seeing more fossil fuel use around the world than at any time in human history. But the answer to your question, Amy, is that AI consumes an enormous amount of electricity. And so these two things are on a collision course. I mean, if we really deploy AI in the way that people are talking about, it is going to require vast quantities of new power, new electricity. And you simply cannot generate the necessary electricity with wind and solar, which the large majority of the time don't work at all. And so something's got to give. Either AI is not going to be deployed in the United States, or liberals are going to have to give up on this supposed green transition, which they've staked, trillions of dollars on.
Talking about secondary issues, secondary to inflation and people's economic well-being. It seems like conservatives are going to zero in on immigration and border security. You heard that over the weekend at the Turning Point event in Detroit. And, of course, the left will focus in on abortion. Who, if either side is correct in prosecuting those issues as their issues? Who do you have faith or concern will prosecute their chosen secondary issue most effectively?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I live in Minnesota, where in 2022 it looked like the issues were aligned perfectly for Republican victory. Cost of living, crime, education, and so on. And the Democrats bet the whole House on abortion. Every single television ad they ran was about abortion. It was the only issue that they ever talked about. And they won. They staved off what seemed like certain defeat by mobilizing. Apparently, the ability to kill unborn children is the most popular platform on which a politician can run. So that worries me. We see that hundreds of millions of dollars are being budgeted around the country to be spent in swing states on one issue, the issue of abortion. On paper, I would say that illegal immigration is a far more powerful issue. It affects vastly more people. I just don't know if you've got the same single-minded dedication to turn millions of people out to the polls on the basis of illegal immigration. I hope so.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly, we were talking about it earlier in the program. I don't think you do. And the proof is how close things are, despite the fact that supermajorities of Americans basically have the position of the Republican Party, of Trump and the Republican Party on the border, and yet the race is where it is in these swing states. And, you can talk about Laken Riley, and you can talk about this
Rachel Moore,
unfortunate woman who was murdered in Maryland. They've just identified the suspect in that case, who's another illegal immigrant from El Salvador.
Who killed a woman in El Salvador, too.
Yeah, he was fleeing a murder charge in El Salvador. Right. I want to know, did they give him a free cell phone? Did he use the Joe Biden app to expedite his illegal entry into the U.S.? I don't think we know the answers yet.
Well, right, but it has the feeling of talking about the repeat violent offender, the indigenous repeat violent offender in a place like Chicago or Minneapolis, who goes out and commits another crime, and everybody wrings their hands and says that's terrible, and then votes for the same people.
Well, you're right, Dan. I mean, I'm still waiting for the first blue city to turn red based on the painful experience of decades of liberal governance. That hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, no, I think this is like a discussion that needs to get leveled up to decision makers at the Trump campaign and RNC level. This abortion immigration thing that we're discussing, because the example you provide from Minnesota is the salient one. I mean, until we can prove that that issue is overcomable, which we haven't in the last several cycles, we may want to, not just not pay attention to it because we don't exactly have a comfortable way to deal with it, and we're just going to pretend we can get over the top by focusing on something other than what a lot of suburbanites have decided is their raison d'etre, as you said.
Yeah, a lot of Republicans have taken the position that it's just not an issue in their particular state. Nothing's going to change. So, for example, in 2022, the Republican candidate for governor, he told me after the election that every time he got up to give a speech, an aide would say to him, "Now remember, don't mention the A word." Right? The A word. Nothing about abortion. Abortion is not an issue. Well, he wound up getting clobbered by, 8 points because the voters thought that the election was all about abortion because that was the only thing the Democrats were talking about.
Right. You have to address it. John Hinderaker, President, Center for the American Experiment, contributor to PowerlineBlog.com. John, thanks as always.
Great to be with you, Dan.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Are you turning 65 and thinking about Medicare? Or are you over 65 and haven't enrolled yet because you still have coverage at work? Either way, Medicare done correctly will be the best health insurance you will ever have. Imagine having an annual deductible of only $240. There are only two good things about aging, wisdom and Medicare. But to navigate the Medicare maze properly, you need a mentor. Best part, my guidance cost you nothing. Call me. I can help.
If you're tired of calling a bureaucrat at an 800 number to help you navigate Medicare, then you need a local expert on your side, your own health insurance mentor. C. Stephen Tucker from healthinsurancementors.com is someone I know and trust. He's a 30-year licensed broker who's been educating our listeners for more than a decade. Steve, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Thanks, Dan. They can visit healthinsurancementors.com or call me directly at 630-674-1551. That's 630-674-1551.
If you're often feeling tired, lacking motivation and drive, gaining weight,